Hi, I'm Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography, based here in beautiful, sunny Naples, Florida. If you've been following my channel for a while, then you know that I recently, too, like a lot of photographers, gave into the hype and started messing around with the Sony A7 series of cameras. And while I love the image quality that the various Sony and Zeiss lenses are capable of producing, truthfully, it's been of a bit of a love-hate relationship with the cameras themselves. Because even though both the A7S and the A7 Mark II are very capable cameras, the AF on these things is enough to give me an aneurysm. Now, that aside, this is the highly touted Sony Zeiss 55mm f1.8 sonar lens, complete with breathtaking optics and rock-solid build. But does its $1,000 price tag prevent it from being a worthwhile addition to your kit? Well, maybe, but let's find out. Okay, so first up is the build quality, and frankly, it's another gem from Sony. Now, it's not quite up to the standard set by the Zeiss 35mm f1.4 lens, but it's really close. As the 55-2 is made out of metal, or mostly made out of metal, and coming in at 0.62 pounds or just under 10 ounces, making it really light and really balanced on both the A7 series and the A6000 series of cameras. Now, in spite of its relatively paltry size and weight, this is in fact a full-frame FE lens, and the f1.8 aperture, or max aperture, more than likely contributes to the smaller size and weight of the lens. Now, the focus ring, it's reasonably well dampened, but it doesn't offer a whole lot of resistance. But it is wide and tactile with a nice ribbed finish. Now, the lens hood, it's also very reminiscent of the 35's lens hood, just on a 1/2 scale. It's a lot smaller, but it too is of a really nice build quality. The front filter thread comes in at a rather smallish 49mm. Now on the inside, there are 7 elements arranged in 5 groups, and there are 9 rounded aperture blades for some really nice and creamy smooth bokeh rendering. The aperture itself, well, it ranges from f1.8 to f22. Oh, and the minimum focus distance is 1.64 feet, or just about 50 centimeters. Finally, the lens is in fact dust and moisture resistant, and at this price point it probably should be. All in, it's a really nice effort from Sony, so for build, we're going to give the 55 f1.8 a 10 out of 10. So next up is autofocus speed and accuracy. Outfitted with a stepper motor, AF speed is surprisingly quick and very accurate. This is very different than the experience that I have with the Sony FE 35mm f1.4, as AF on the 55 feels really snappy and secure. Because even if the lens flies past the intended target, it comes back and it happens so quickly that you may not even notice that the initial attempt at acquiring focus was a miss. It's almost like a wide receiver. It's kind of the only analogy I can think of. It's like a wide receiver bobbling a catch for a split second before he actually secures the football. That said, the difference between how quickly the 35 and the 55 capture focus is noticeable, with the 55 being faster to capture accurate focus, which frankly surprised me because I expected AF performance to be consistent amongst the various FE lenses, as I believed it was the A7 bodies that were the root cause of the AF problems that I've been experiencing. This is clearly not the case with the 55, and especially with the Sony A6000, as autofocus on that little camera is awesome. Overall, the 55 is a much better performer with regard to AF speed and accuracy. And by the way, it also performs a lot better in low light conditions as well. Now, as a side note, as we were completing this review, Sony just updated the firmware of the A7 Mark II to version 2.0. Now, what this firmware does, it takes better advantage of the phase detect points inside of the A7 Mark II for classic A-mount lenses with an adapter. There are some videos out there that actually show the difference between the old firmware and the new firmware with A-mount lenses and adapters. And based on those videos, things do look much better and faster. Now, thankfully, Metabones is also going to be updating their adapters to take advantage of the new firmware as well. It looks like on those videos that it still hunts a tiny bit, but nothing like it used to. It's nice to see Sony quickly addressing the needs of their photographers. Nice work, Sony. By the way, there wasn't any reference to improved autofocus performance with FE lenses, and maybe it's just me, but focus does seem to be even faster than before with the new firmware. At least that's what it seems like. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's just my experience. Now, with regard to manual focus, well, it's like other fly-by-wire lenses from Sony, which is good and bad. because the lens reacts to how quickly you're rotating the focus ring. So if you move it really quickly, it's great if you want to focus quickly because it's reacting to that. But it's bad because you can't set preset stops like you would with a manual focus or non-fly-by-wire lens. It's something that many videographers, I'm sure, would like Sony to address, especially given how much emphasis these cameras have towards video. It's just something that you need to be aware of. So all in, AF speed is fast, silent, and very accurate. To me, it's an overall really impressive performance. I just wish there was a way to engineer out the focus flying past the intended target before it came back and acquired focus. If it could do that, then this thing would be a 10 out of 10. Unfortunately, that's a problem with a lot of mirrorless cameras. And again, granted, it happens so fast that truthfully it probably won't prevent you from getting the intended shot, but you do notice it happening. Anyway, for AF speed and accuracy, the 55 gets a very solid 9.5 out of 10. So next up is optical quality and the quality of the results. And in a word, they're astonishing. Really, I have to say that on the whole, I've been quite impressed with Sony Zeiss's optics in general. First, with the 35mm FE f1.4, which I absolutely loved, especially when it hit focus, which thankfully happened often enough. That said, the 55 is way better than the 35 in the AF department, making the 55 an absolute pleasure and joy to use. I find the focus to be quick and snappy. It's impressive. Oh, and it's a lot more accurate too. I find that I'm comfortable shooting this lens in low light much more so than I was with the 35. So when you combine fast, accurate focus with brilliant optics, well, to me it's just a match made in heaven. And the 55 from Sony just doesn't disappoint. Big pluses for this lens include Tack sharp optics. I mean, they're amazing, really. The color, the contrast, just the overall mood of the images is just something special. Now on the downside, like nearly every wide aperture lens, there is some noticeable purple fringing and in the high contrast areas, and there's some vignetting at wide apertures too. Fortunately, both of those things are easily fixed with just about any software program today. But apart from those nits, this thing is just a piece of awesome. However, as with all of my reviews, rather than me talking about the image quality, I'd rather just show you. The next 2 minutes or so is going to be a series of stills and video clips showcasing the optical prowess of the Sony Zeiss 55mm f1.8. And Sony is continuing the trend of optical legends with the 55mm f1.8. It's awesome. So last up is value. And this is the section that's certainly going to raise some eyebrows for a lot of people because on paper, it's an f1.8 50mm lens that costs nearly $1,000. That doesn't look like such a great value, especially when you consider that other 50mm options out there from both Canon and Nikon are 1/8 and 1/4 of the cost of the Sony respectively. But neither of those lenses have Zeiss optics. The Nikon is probably the better of those other two, but that said, I'm not convinced that this Sony is 4 times better than the Nikon either. There is one other option out there from Rokinon. That's also Samyang, Bauer, etc. It's all the same lens, just a different branding on it. Anyway, that lens is 50mm and it's an f1.4, but it's manual focus, but it's only $399. The Sony is all metal, the others are made out of plastic. The Sony is also weather sealed, the others are not. And the aforementioned optics. I've read several reviews that claim that they think this 55mm f1.8 is the best optic they've ever used. And then of course, if you ever want to start a controversy, you can also reference DxOMark, which has the 55mm f1.8 as the highest rated of all the Sony lenses. So there's that. But if you're a Sony shooter, there really aren't a lot of other native professional 50mm options out there, at least not yet. So to me, $1,000 is a stiff premium for an f1.8 lens, but at least this one delivers where it counts. But is it really 4 times better than the bulk of f1.8 lenses available today? Better? Yes. But 4 times better? I'm not so sure. So for value, we get the Sony Zeiss 55mm f1.8 a 7 out of 10. So to wrap up this review, we give the Sony Zeiss 55mm f1.8 a 46 out of 50 and our highly recommended rating. The final word. If you've recently converted to the mirrorless system of Sony, specifically the A7 series of cameras, and you need a lens in the 50mm range, then the Sony Zeiss 55mm f1.8 is an optically excellent lens with very few but really important considerations. On the upside, this thing has just killer build and fantastic optics, reasonably fast and accurate autofocus, weather resistance, and an included lens hood. Yay! The only major downside, frankly, is the price, which is considerable at nearly $1,000 and a biggie for a max f1.8 aperture lens. Couple that with the fact that there really isn't another native FE lens out there in the 50mm range. At least not at the time of this review. Here we are in November of 2015. Now, if you desire this focal length on your A7, then you're kind of stuck with a $1,000 bill to get it. Sure, there are other options out there like the A-mount 50mm f1.4 and 50mm f1.8, but you're going to have to buy an adapter to make those work with your A7. But that's certainly a cheaper alternative, especially for something that's generally as inexpensive as a nifty 50. Just keep in mind, if you go that route, neither 50mm alpha lens is in the same league optically as the Zeiss. This is Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography, based here in beautiful, sunny Naples, Florida. If you like these reviews, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next time, happy shooting.